Change begins from within. As easy as it is to look outside of ourselves and want the world to change, the truth is, it never will if we remain the same. This podcast was created for changemakers like you who want more love and connection in your community. Today, you are going to hear stories that will inspire you and also challenge you to be the change. We are going to go deep, my friend. So take a deep breath and settle in. My name is Emilia Tamburini. Welcome to the Circle of Change. Hi, Changemaker. My heart is full. We have just crossed over into the fall equinox and entered into my favorite season of the year. I also adore our guest today. It feels like the perfect kickoff to the fall season. So pour yourself a cup of tea and settle in to absorb this circle. In just a few conversations with our guest, she has made a huge impact on my life. And I know this episode will create a shift for you. Before I introduce Madeleine, I want to thank those of you who have become official supporters of Circle of Change. Yes, it lights me up to see your contributions. I also love that we can start to expand and grow our reach and bring back accessibility features like transcripts so that this show remains available to everyone. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I see you. I feel your love. And for those of you who want to learn more, go to glow.fm/circle of change, all one word. Today in Circle is the most amazing Madeleine Shaw. She is a social entrepreneur and author based on the unceded Coast Salish territory. She is the co-founder of Isle, formerly known as Lunapads, one of the first groundbreaking ventures in the world to popularize reusable menstrual products. In her first book, The Greater Good, Social Entrepreneurship for Everyday People Who Want to Change the World, she offers a candid, personal look at the realities of change making. And she is so much more than all of that. In this conversation, she will jolt your current reality and encourage you to question everything for the betterment of humanity. So if you have an inkling that something just is not right about the world and the systems around you, you're going to find your home in this conversation. It's a very honest discussion where she awakens the feminine warrior in you. And she does it in such a welcoming, inclusive, and generative way. We talk about embracing your menstrual cycle, to thinking about the impact of the products that you're using, to growing a business that aligns with the natural laws and makes a difference in the world. Personally, I have been really disconnected from my menstrual cycle, and I found this conversation to be enlightening and sometimes uncomfortable. I could feel myself go into shame for not having a greater connection and awareness like she does. I say that just in case you also find yourself going there. You're not alone. But what I did find was that Madeleine's welcoming approach left me feeling healed and free. And that's what I want for you. I want that for every man and woman. And that's why I want all of you to listen to this episode, because this, I believe, is one of the conversations for our time. Madeleine drops a bunch of juicy book references and amazing human references, including her own. And we've got all those for you in the show notes, just in case you miss jotting down something as she goes along. All right, Changemaker, enjoy this episode. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. Madeleine, thanks so much for joining us here in the Circle of Change today. It's such an honor to have you here.
Likewise, Amelia. It's my absolute pleasure. I'm really, really honored and excited.
Cool. Me too. I love that we're kicking off the fall season here in the Northern Hemisphere with you, because when I look at what you've been up to in the world, and I'm learning that through your book and through the talk I got to witness, I really see that you're a harvester. You're harvesting. You create these new ideas, and it feels like you work with an ecosystem of support to bring them to life, all in service of making this world a better place. And I cannot think of a more honorable life mission. So thank you so much for being here, but also for the work that you do.
Oh, thanks, friend. It means the world to me. And I'd like to come back to that notion of harvesting perhaps later in the conversation and sort of dig a bit deeper there.
Yeah, that sounds great. We are going to dive into all sorts of juicy topics today that are, I know, of interest to the listener that is here also sitting with us in circle. And I'm excited in anticipation. As I was prepping, I thought, oh my gosh, we need 3 to 24 hours for all the stories and lessons that you have for us. It's so cool knowing there's a possibility of more. And today we are here focused on whatever nuggets arise.
Sounds perfect.
So, speaking of the present moment, let's take a moment to get grounded here in this moment. So, Madeleine, I invite you as well, if you would like, to close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and let go of anything that doesn't serve you in this moment. And feel free to take 2 more deep breaths in and out, preparing yourself, the listener, for what are those nuggets that you're here to receive today. And as you do that, I'm going to read a poem by my new favorite poet, Joy Harjo. She's the poet laureate of the United States at the current moment, and I am loving her words. These poems, I picked them right before recording, and I love how the universe is always supporting this work. It's called Granddaughters. I was a thought, a dream, a fish, a wing, and then a human being when I emerged from my mother's river on my father's boat of potent fever. I carried a sack of dreams from a starlit dwelling to be opened when I begin bleeding. There's a red dress, deerskin moccasins, the taste of berries made of promises, while the memories shift in their skins at every moon to do their ripening. And that's called Granddaughters. Thank you so much, Joy, for those beautiful words.
Wow. I love that. Thank you. I'm not familiar with, certainly heard of that poet, but I had not heard that poem. And I find that so moving. Just the idea that folks with uteruses, we carry the seeds, the eggs, literally, of our grandchildren within us. It's powerful. And we hold that.
Mm-hmm.
We hold that. Yeah.
Beautiful. I certainly thought of you when I read it. I thought, yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to begin our conversation today, or continue it really, with what I think is a gift of a question. It's an open doorway into your soul, your essential being. And the question is, who are you? And if you brought a talking piece with you, feel free to introduce it here. And if you didn't, that is fine as well. So, Madeleine, who are you?
It's such a great question. I have a talking piece here with me that was sitting on my lap as I listened to the poem. And to most people, to the naked eye, it would just look like a beat up old oyster shell. This is actually one of the larger or more whole examples of these things that I call yoys, which is kind of a shortened version of the word oyster, because they're typically fragments. And I collect them from a particular beach on the coast of the Salish Sea. And they're very special to me because of the way they weather. They have so many different layers, and there's this luminous kind of quality. And they've just been rolled around on the shores for literally hundreds of years. As a species, they're protandric hermaphrodites, which means that they began their lives as male in their first part of their lives, and then they switch over to become female to procreate, and which is a really interesting example. Anyways, I just think they're super cool because they get to be rolled around in the waves like humans are rolled around by life, and just become more revealed and beautiful and luminous rather than beat up and broken. And, it's a metaphor for how we see aging, basically, and that I personally really resonate with. So, who am I? I am a white settler on the coasts of Turtle Island here on traditional unceded stolen land that belongs to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And very, very grateful to be here and to be able to harvest joys off their beaches and build my life. So, among other things, I would say, I mean, I'm a change maker, but more my word for it actually that I discuss in the book and my avatar that I created for myself is an instigator. And what that usually looks like is not being afraid to go first and just or calling it or saying it or speaking the truth or doing the unpopular thing or encouraging someone going, come on, do it. Like so many of us we're holding on to things and we're just kind of waiting for sort of a partner or someone to encourage. Encouragement is probably my favorite recreational drug of choice to go, come on, let's go, step out of your box, step out of your fear. So I call myself an instigator. I am also, generally speaking, a leader. I've, in many respects, and I've founded multiple entities and organizations. And so that's kind of what it looks like. But ultimately, beneath that is a deeply creative spirit. So when I start a company or an enterprise, let's call it, because I really don't care whether something's for profit or not for profit. And I find that distinction very unhelpful or limiting, let's put it that way. It's coming from a place of creativity and resistance. I'm just doing the thing because there's this thing that I want to change, but it's a way of expressing my values or expressing my heart and things that I believe in. So I am a gardener and who loves growing things, and I have the greatest reverence for things. I think more than anything, I love growing things and or watching things grow, and those can include obviously plants. I'm a pretty prolific gardener, but I also love growing relationships and ideas and visions and kind of anything. I have a very generative spirit and I like to see what's possible. And I'm a mother. So, of like this amazing, amazing daughter who at this moment is on day 3 of a 6-day solo hike up the Sunshine Coast. So this person goes hiking at the age of 17 by herself in the middle of the wilderness. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, but I know why, but it's very interesting. It's always still shocking, having wanted to raise an independent daughter and do whatever. It's always kind of shocking when she does something radically independent, and I'm like, wait, I'm scared, but I can't really say I told you not to do that. It's like I did tell you to do that. Or encouraged you to do that. So I'm a mother, I'm a feminist, and I am a friend and a daughter, and that's a pretty good list.
It's a fabulous list. Thank you for that. It's so beautiful how well you know yourself, who you are, and certainly everything that you've reflected is what I have been able to observe and see in you in such a short time knowing you. I love the word instigator, and that is so fitting. Yeah. Yeah. This community here is a community of change makers, and we need instigators in this circle. So this is awesome that you're here joining us and sharing your wisdom and stories.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It felt really wonderful to claim it for myself because I was looking through a book of avatars, and there's the magician and the rebel and the liberator, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of that, and I'm kind of that, and I'm kind of that, and then I don't know, just the word instigator came to me, and I was like, it's another thing I like to do is like just not accept oh, okay, well, there's 12 archetypes and you must choose one. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? Honestly, like there could be hundreds, and it should start from the place of finding something that's true for you. It always amazes me in life how often we just kind of presume these are the rules and this is how it must be, and you can't change that, or you can't. It's like somebody made those things up. Somebody made them up, and maybe you could make up something different.
Mm. That's what I love about you. You're always questioning and putting those questions out to others. Yeah, it's amazing, right? I'm just thinking of like all the check boxes, like the gender check boxes. For so long, it was like male or female was the choice. Oh, okay. And no questioning of anything else. Or those job categories that the government makes you fill out. And
Occupation.
exactly. It's like
Yeah.
my occupation doesn't fit in here. It doesn't. uh, that's the world that you're creating. And I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd love the listener to hear more about what that has actually looked like for you over the years. So I'm curious if you'd like to share a bit of your journey to hear with us, whatever that feels like, whatever is coming to you in this moment.
Thank you for that. And so, in terms of instigation, like I have memories of being really, really young, like kindergarten, grade one, and being with a group of other kids. And there was this question of like, what should we do? What do you want to play? And there was all this awkwardness, like this sort of like, oh, and I would just say, how about this? The kids would be like, okay. And we would play that. And it wasn't coming from a place of like, I want to play this game and you need to play it with me. It was just like, I have an idea. And if that seems like a good idea to you, then let's, just throwing it in the pot. It seemed to stick. That became a little bit edgier later on in life. So I attended a private girls' school for elementary school, and I really found it super challenging to my nature, to question things. And anyways, it was there was a lot of tension there. And I also got sent to, by my very well-intentioned loving mother, to something called brownies, which is like a version of the Girl Guides, a younger version that's in Canada. I'm sure you have listeners many places, but anyways, I hated brownies. I didn't understand what we were doing there. I hated the uniforms, which were brown. We just had all these like dumb little rituals. It didn't mean anything to me. It just didn't feel like there was any purpose there. And also it was very top down. Like it was brown owl and tawny owl, and they told you what to do and when to do it. And that's just how it went. And there was no discussion. There was no kind of creative, like, hey, girls, what would you like to do today? Or what do we, no, 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 how are we feeling as a group? Or like, it was just, I talk, you listen, kind of thing. And I hated it to the point where, and I mean, I was maybe 9 and I still remember that. And I acted out and I ended up essentially getting asked to leave brownies and was ultimately asked to leave the school that I was attending as well, because the formal charge at the end of my grade 9 year was that I was inciting, which is a lot like instigation. I was inciting rebellion in my peers. And that was the problem.
Yeah.
And that was why I had to go. And so, but it's such an interesting choice of words. And to me, it's like, they're not trying to nicely say something bad. They're actually saying what I was doing in a very factual way. I was exhibiting leadership in a way. It was inciting others. It wasn't just going, screw you teachers or whatever. Like I was trying to build consensus among my peers and go, why are we doing it this way? Why do we have to, whatever I was railing against. And so that was high school. And then by the time I got to university, I discovered feminism. And the way I discovered feminism was 2 ways. One, and at this point, I'd already experienced some sexual violence in various ways in my life. But in this case, I was in my very first year at university. And the university had a very strong tradition of kind of hazing, or a frosh week, as it was known. And I was 17 years old, and I had to lie down in a muddy field with all of the other new girls who had just come for their first, year. A whole bunch of boys came out, the football team, and they were dressed in and the rugby team, I think too, I can't remember. Anyways, and they did push-ups on top of the girls in the middle of this muddy field. So all these drunk guys doing basically this fake rape enactment kind of thing going on in this, it was just disgusting, everything about it. And I was like, what is the purpose of, like, I feel actually like deeply threatened by this and deeply frightened. And it feels like the message I'm getting is get in line and get ready for this actually happening in a room with your clothes off, kind of thing. It was very aggressive and very disturbing to me. So that was one of the first things that happened to me when I went there. And then I wanted to be an English major, and I got into my English 110 survey class. So full year of kind of the survey of English literature and the canon, if you will. And I looked at the syllabus and I realized that there was not one single word on it written by a woman.
Wow.
Like not even a poem. Not a poem, not even not a word.
Yeah.
Not a word for an entire year that is supposed to be English literature. And I sat back and I felt so deeply disappointed. My first reaction was disappointment, like just feeling devastated. And then my second reaction was, fuck you guys. I got up and left the class. I literally, whatever, down the hall and up the stairs and whatever. And I went to the women's studies department, as it was then called. Today would be known as gender studies, and switched majors because I wanted to read books written by women.
Yeah. So you had to go to the women's department.
So yeah, exactly. And I was interested in women in history. And so I took a course in women in history because, of course, they couldn't be in the men's history, the regular history, the real history. I mean, it was just stupid. Anyways, this is the late 1980s for context for people. So I was at university 85 to 89. So all that happened academically. And then getting back to the experience in the field and whatever, I started to become very active as a student leader and created and enacted campaigns like No Means No and Take Back the Night, and which some folks might remember. Anyways, they're just feminist activists. Take Back the Night is a march that goes through, wherever you happen to be. They've taken place many, many places worldwide, and to say that, women deserve to be safe anytime, anywhere, but especially at night. And because there were a lot of cases of sexual assault in this community. And so there's that. So I screened, films and had discussion groups and protests. And I trained as a sexual assault crisis counselor. So yeah, so basically my early kind of late teens and early 20s were my emergence as a feminist leader. And as that is like that's me, like that is my identity. And, school, I did okay. I hung in there. But I guess I'll fast forward a bit. I did a lot of traveling after I graduated from university and lived in France and Israel and the United States and just a few places off and on. And I traveled a lot to Southeast Asia and Africa and a bunch of places. Anyways, settled back into Vancouver. And I knew that the whole like corporate thing in terms of a career it was just not going to happen. Like there was no way. No. I was too far gone, but obviously I needed to do something. So a whole lot of things kind of happened all at once in the form of like this. I still had this very strong creative streak. And when I was a kid, I loved making things. I loved sewing. And that was sort of my favorite. And I still wanted to do that. Like I still had that desire. And so I started making things and getting back to it. And as part of that, I started making washable menstrual pads and period underwear. And that became a really important idea because I'd gone off the pill. And so it was like after 10 years, I was really, really, really experiencing my cycle in a very embodied way that was really meaningful to me. And I was like, wow, this is as cool as 12-year-old me thought it was going to be. Yeah. But 12-year-old me, got shut down pretty quickly with a society that wasn't interested and didn't want to celebrate it. So anyways, bit by bit, entrepreneurship came to me, I think, quite naturally as an extension of if I need to monetize my social political agenda, like I need to create a way of doing that, of getting paid to be a feminist activist. And developing these products, which were then called Luna Pads, was my way of doing it, and of doing all manner of sewing. Like I've probably made about 20 wedding dresses. I've made bedding. I've made all kinds of like really quite sophisticated garments. Like I really am very good at sewing, and I love making things with my hands. And yeah, so anyways, founded Luna Pads, now known as Isle or Period Isle, and along the way, two other entities, one called G-Day, that was an event series for girls that was kind of reflected that unfulfilled moment of the 12-year-old who really cared about menarche and really cared about what was happening and thought it was special, but never was sort of initiated or recognized or celebrated at that time. And that came back to me as a vision much later in life. And another project I'm still working on called Nestworks, which is a vision for a co-working space where parents can bring their children and to kind of reimagine this so-called work-life balance, which I like to think of as work-life integration. I am inspired by old ideas like reusable menstrual products. How long have they been around for, do you think? I'm thinking even Lilith in the garden were sewing their own, menstrual pads together or hanging out. Or the idea of children and work and family being more integrated instead of separate. Like, wasn't that like a pre-industrial society where, you'd have somebody, mom or dad, parent being a blacksmith or a weaver or whatever, and then having sheep in the backyard and the kids would be spinning the wool and that, like this, it was all one. There wasn't this drama. And similarly with G-Day, rites of passage among families to acknowledge youth transitioning between childhood and adolescence, is as old as time. I don't like to think of myself creating anything kind of new per se, but kind of upcycling, if you will, ideas and trying to do something good. I just think everybody, to the extent that it's possible for them, and I know it's not possible for everybody, part of, what I've been able to do is predicated on a pretty significant chunk of social privilege that, I've not had to attend to, I'm not a single mother and I'm not a person of color and I'm not, Indigenous and I'm not like a lot of things that would have made my circumstances different and probably much harder to start from. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. However, that's what I've done more or less. And then I wrote a book about it. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Hands up. So it's such an inspiring journey that you've just shared with us. I mean, there's so many things that come to mind. First of all, is that there's no box for you. There's no checkbox for you and what you're up to in the world and what you're creating. What I was really struck with, especially right at the beginning, was your awareness of kind of like a moral, I don't know if it's a moral compass, but like something wasn't right. And you decided to take action on it, whether that was switching out of the program and going to women's studies, or just knowing in that hazing activity that this wasn't right. This was fundamentally wrong and actually traumatizing. But you had the awareness of it. That feels to me like it is just feeding everything that you do. I notice you pay close attention to language as well, the words that you use and what do they really mean? And is there a new word for this that actually more fully encompasses what we're talking about here now today, which I think is cool. These are skill sets that are required today for this transition that we're in, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. Like we're naming new things, like just the example of gender as a binary. There's so many binaries that are exploding right now. And so when we go from a binary to a spectrum, the names of what is on that spectrum and the places that are there and the space that it creates it's incredible. So yeah, no, I agree because I still did actually maintain a double major in English and women's studies because I love words and I love writing. And eventually by the time we got to the Victorians, there were some women writers on the syllabus.
Too good. I want to stay focused a bit on the journey of menstruation, really, and your focus on it, because I think it's so powerful. And certainly it impacted me a lot to hear your story and the creation of Luna Pads, now called Isle. You use a couple of words when speaking about this journey: period poverty and menstrual equity. These are words that do not exist in my vocabulary. And I think a lot of folks listening might also feel that as well. So I wanted to just create some space here for you to share with us your thoughts on those specific words, why they're important, why is a focus on the menstrual journey, celebrating it, acknowledging it, so important.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two questions, and I'm going to answer the second question first about the menstrual journey, as you put it. And part of the story that I left out about the early Madeline was that I was kind of obsessed with the idea of becoming an adult woman. As you know, 10, 11, 12, I read a book called "Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret" by Judy Blume, which I'm sure, I hope many of your listeners are familiar with. And if you're not, go read it anyways, no matter whatever age you are. Anyways, Margaret and her friends are fascinated by puberty, basically, as this impending, all these impending changes. And they have a club and they talk about it, and they wonder what it's going to be like to get their period, and they wonder what it's like to wear a bra and grow breasts, and they, all these things, right? Anyways, and I felt that way too. Like, I so strongly, I was like, I cannot believe that this thing is going to happen to me. Like, this amazing, amazing thing. Like, I thought of adult women, to me, were like goddesses. They were like exotic birds or something, like astronauts or something just amazing. And I knew, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get called up to the ranks, and I'm going to be this thing. And because I just thought they were the best. And I very much tied that in my mind to starting my period. That was how you knew that was the go sign, kind of thing. And so obviously I venerated that moment, like that. It felt like it would be incredibly special. And but in fact, when it happened, it was kind of a non-event. It was extremely painful. And my brother and his friend made fun of me. My mom supported me, but she would not have been one to be, throwing flower petals at my feet and, whatever, getting all her friends and having some, whatever, something, which is what I yearned for in my heart, even though I didn't have words for it. Like, I wouldn't have even been able to name my desire for that experience, but I totally knew that I like had it. I could, but I wouldn't have been able to say, Mom, or Dad, or, could you do like, I would just be like, words wouldn't have come out of my mouth. So all of that went away and kind of sublimated until I was much older. And it came back in a couple of ways. So I mentioned earlier, I was on hormonal birth control from age 15 to 25. And so I was really not connected with my cycle, like super duper not. But for various reasons, came off the hormonal birth control and really like was just so impressed and excited about kind of really reconnecting with this whole energy of being a cyclical being, and all the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs and the whatever. And I was just like being on, I think I say in the book, it was like being on the new roller coaster ride at the emotional amusement park or something like that. Like, and it was really exciting. And it made me sad that I'd missed that part of myself for 10 years, that I kind of suppressed it. And so when I did that, I created simultaneously, I was having allergic reactions to using disposable pads and tampons, especially tampons, that just became intolerable to me. And so I, for various reasons, became inspired to make washable, reusable alternatives so that I didn't have to use tampons anymore. When I did that, it was such an interesting experience because I really thought I was solving a practical problem. Like, hey, I'm bleeding and I need to do something about this. Or not. I mean, I guess I could have free bled and been, I wasn't there yet, just trying to move around in the world. And anyways, so I started to do that. And the experience in doing that changed everything. Like, if you think about it on a psychological or subconscious level, when we're using a disposable product to manage our period and then throwing it in the garbage, you're basically treating something that is incredibly amazing, miraculous even, as something disgusting and gross that we need to soak it in chemicals and wrap it in more plastic and then throw it in a landfill and not tell anybody about it. Just the inherent act of doing that. It may seem like a very practical, like, you are doing this practical thing that your body needs you to whatever. And it's like, yes, 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 that's true. And it's not wrong or bad. But there's kind of a subtext to the whole thing that I think is really harmful, because really the taboo around reusable menstrual products, whenever, if anybody is having kind of a hearing about it and having a visceral reaction of like, ew, let's go into that for a sec. Because what that means is they're imagining touching your menses, because you have to. if you take out your menstrual cup or you've got your period underwear and you've got to wash some of your pads, you are literally touching menstrual blood, which in our culture is an absolutely taboo thing. Like that is like the entire industry of menstrual products is built around doing like applicators and whatever, every single thing that you can do, not to touch yourself, not to see the blood. You're to be protected is the language of sanitary protection and hygiene and all these things, which of course implies that, speaking of words, that what this absolutely 100% natural process is somehow toxic waste. Like you are a walking biohazard, let's face it.
Oh my God, it's so true.
And it's wild because it's not spoken of that way. But if it's like, if you actually take all the, like, if you just watch the actions and watch the whole life cycle of, the products and whatever, it's just, that's what it is. When I did at the time this incredibly transgressive thing, but we know I like doing transgressive things in my early 20s and started washing my pads, I was like, it just gave me this feeling of liberation and also of magic, like also that self connection, like that little 11-year-old who knew that starting my period would matter, that it would show me something, that it would give me something and give me some kind of insight into who I was and like what, like it still makes me emotional. Like the fact, I remember when I was a kid, somebody told me that the average menstrual cycle was the same number of days as the lunar cycle. And I'll still remember how I felt hearing that. I was like, that's like the biggest, most important piece of information I've ever heard. Like, what does that tell you? I don't need to know the full extent of the mystery of that, but the mystery of it is pretty freaking huge. And wanting to connect with that and then realizing that every single other thing in our world is cyclical. Like it's how every single thing works. It's how our breath works. It's how our heartbeat works. It's how our blood moves. It's how the seasons change. It's how we understand a day. It's like, it's the fundamental energy of the universe is going in this cycle. And as someone who has a cycle inside her, I'm part of that. And that was what I wanted somebody to tell me. So that's really where the original interest in menstruation came from. And it's the inspiration for G Day, which was an event series that I ran for 6 years across Canada. But I want to answer your question about period poverty and menstrual equity as well. So the term menstrual equity was coined in 2015 by a very, very wise woman called Jennifer Weiss-Wolf, who's an American lawyer and social justice advocate and wrote an amazing book called Periods Gone Public about that time. And she's an editor at Ms. Magazine now. Anyways, follow her on social media. Okay, so what is period poverty? Period poverty is a situation where people who menstruate lack access to products. So as a baseline, and to that, I would qualify that, and I would say safe and sustainable and high quality menstrual products. The reasons for that lack of access are things to do with poverty is a huge one. So just not being able to afford them, in the same way that people struggle to afford food, whatever, anything, rent, menstrual products are expensive. It is until now gone without saying that the responsibility for procurement of menstrual products is on the individual. You bleed, you pay, right? Of course. Fortunately, and also period poverty also encompasses lack of access to quality education and lack of access to just human kindness around like freedom of stigma, I guess, is what I would say. So it's kind of a component of like, as a society, to have a positive attitude about menstruation, menstrual products need to be free and accessible to everyone who needs them. And we need to be properly educated about what all this is. So period poverty is when those things don't exist. And menstrual equity is the solution. So period poverty is the problem and menstrual equity is the solution. Menstrual equity is an interesting term. So equity, what does that mean, in the context of menstruation? And the way I like to think about it is on a very, very, very practical level. When we go into a bathroom on library or school or wherever, you don't have to bring your own toilet paper or soap or hand towels or whatever. Like all of those things are provided to you as a matter of basic human dignity, the acknowledgement that you need those things. We all need those things in order to be fully able to participate in life or work or just walking down the street. So that's where the equity part. So this is a social justice issue. Like this isn't just a lack of access to products. Like this reflects a systemic bias against people who menstruate, that we've got to fix our own problem because its periods are a problem. And then we're back to that whole mindset that, it's a mess to be cleaned up. It's a problem to be fixed. It's not, something that is, we can, every single one of our, credit our existence to the fact that somebody had a period once upon a time. There's no reverence for it. And so menstrual equity is seeking very, very practically to solve all of those problems, but also to the problems of period poverty, but also to elevate this to legislative changes where, schools and workplaces need to be mandated to provide menstrual products to their constituents as a matter of basic human fairness and dignity. And for example, in Canada, here we've seen recently two big moves earlier this spring. So one was the announcement by the federal government of Canada of a $25 million menstrual equity fund that is going to be earmarked to provide products for marginalized Canadians in various ways. And in the province of British Columbia, it was announced earlier in April that they're the creation of a period poverty task force to see what can be done at a provincial level. So those are really important steps. And increasingly, we're seeing the provision of free disposable pads and tampons in bathrooms and schools and so on. But the message I have around that is like, yes, awesome. That is baseline. Like that is table stakes. That has to happen. But we also need to ask ourselves, what about sustainability? And therefore, my work right now today is working with institutions to provide individuals with reusable menstrual products. So we're not stuck in this endless cycle of waste and cost and forcing people to go to a bathroom when they may not be on campus and like all these finding a bathroom that aligns with their gender. It's, it's not actually the provision of free disposable products in bathrooms is not an effective or sustainable solution to period poverty. So some people think it is, and there are these huge product drives, and there's all this stuff and the pictures of all these mountains of disposable products. And honestly, when I look at it, I just imagine what they're going to look like in a landfill. And yes, along the way, they will solve a whole bunch of people's problems on a very temporary, very important, critical, actually, basis. So anyways, I'm a big proponent of like a dual solution model where we're providing people with reusable to reduce the demand on these disposables and enhance access and be more sustainable along the way. So that's kind of what my life looks like now for the most part, like in terms of work. And I'm very excited about it because this could never have happened until now. Like I've been doing this work since 1993. And there's no way anybody's going to give you a free tampon in a bathroom. Like, for goodness sake, go get your 50 cents. Go get come on, these things cost money. Like we've gone from that to like a complete sea change in terms of like people really coming to understand that the onus for procurement lies on institutions, not on individuals. And that is like the psychological shift behind that is just like, that's seismic. It's massive. And it's thanks to the work of people like Jennifer Weiss-Wolf and organizations like period.org. And like they're an activist. There's so many amazing, amazing activists in this space that anyways, I could name a whole bunch of names, but they're people really care about this issue. And so what I'm hoping to do now is having kind of started this whole thing or created kind of a foundation in many ways for it to happen is now to come full circle and go, okay, if we agree as a society that is the morally just, right, smart thing to do to provide people who menstruate with products, then we need to be doing that as sustainably as possible because climate change.
Amazing, Madeleine. Oh, the thought that was coming to me was decolonization as you were speaking, because what I heard was this separation of this beautiful part of our bodies and how they operate, completely tied in with the moon cycle. And that for so long, I don't know how many years, hundreds of years, that relationship has been disconnected. And we have been taught to be ashamed and to hide that part of who we are, which is miraculous is a perfect word for it. And I just think about Indigenous culture and this journey that we're all on right now of decolonizing our ways of being. And a big part of that, I think, is reintegrating and seeing the interconnectedness of all things and the beauty in that. And I think that also relates to what you're talking about by looking at the solutions through that ecosystem lens to say, well, wait a second, it's not just like, here's the solution down this one line. Like, what are the unintended consequences of that? Oh, the climate and, the piles in the landfill and all of that. To me, that's beautiful. To me, that's reconciliation, that's decolonization in action, which is something that I'm quite passionate about. And I know you are too. And I think the other thing that I really heard when you shared was that you've really tuned into this thread. For whatever reason, the menstrual cycle, like it's in your soul. Like there's something in you that, there's nothing else you can do, I don't think, in this lifetime. It's like, this is your journey. But that's the thread you picked up on and are going at it full on. What I love about that is reminds me that there are so many ways to be a change maker in the world. And it doesn't really matter what thread we pick up on, but more that we follow our heart, that thing that really brings up the emotion, like it's bringing up in you. It's like, that's the thing, and keep walking toward it in whatever way reveals itself to you. So those are just some thoughts that I had that came up as you were sharing these beautiful and very passionate stories. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you for that. And I agree with you. As a non-Indigenous person, I have been very much with a spirit of reverence, like the things that I talk about with this relationship of the moon, and like that's been Indigenous wisdom for millennia, and having reverence for when youth transition from childhood to adolescence, and whether that's menarche or whatever it looks like there's ancient Indigenous wisdom that has always been there to honor and celebrate that. And so, I'm just kind of a settler coming into the picture, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later and going, wow, isn't this cool? And all the while, there's ancient, countless generations of grandmothers and elders and aunties who have known these things. And so, yeah, it's important. And the value of ritual as well, and celebrating and marking things is something that I'm incredibly interested in. That's what G-Day was for. It wasn't specifically a menarche ritual, but more of a general acknowledgement of the transition between childhood and adolescence. And we would have Indigenous teachers at G-Day to kind of speak to that, the types of things that you're talking about. And it's one thread. It's interesting to me now, though, that I haven't had a period for about 2.5 years. And so I'm menopausal and I'm still looking. It happened right before COVID. My last period was December 24th, 2019. I have not fully found a way to honor that, or to kind of enter, like, I like to think of the phase I'm in now as queendom or the wise woman. It's super, super interesting to me. So I'm still, engaged in the business, if you will, of menstruation. And I did the math. I had my period over 400 times in my life. And, but so it's just, it's a new phase, and there's new things and it's interesting. It coincided perfectly with the writing of the book. And so I just know I have more things in me and more gifts to offer, and working with people and in different ways. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too. So you brought up your book, and I'm grateful that you did, because I don't want to leave this conversation without diving into it just a little bit. And maybe we can have you back to dive in a little bit deeper. The book is called The Greater Good: Social Entrepreneurship for Everyday People Who Want to Change the World. Oh my gosh. Seriously. Like I light up every time I read this title. It's like, yes. It's a beautiful book and it's my new business Bible. It's candid, it's informative, it's inviting, it's warm, but it also is strong and encouraging and so incredibly useful. So I'm going to pass this book along to every entrepreneur that I know because I think it is the book for this time. So thank you for following whatever that nudge was to get this book out into the world. Maybe the question for this moment, so people can understand that this book is for them, is to talk a little bit about social entrepreneurship and what that actually is, and maybe who's an entrepreneur, and then just what's your intention for this book? What was your hope?
Oh, thank you. So the book, yeah, so many things. I guess in my experience, I noticed this strange cognitive dissonance between being in a world of social entrepreneurs. So, which is to say, a social entrepreneur is someone who simply puts the social first. It's like they're looking for impact. And then the entrepreneur part comes second. The word entrepreneur is derived from a French verb, literally just meaning to undertake. So you're just taking some form of action to create some form of impact is really all it is. And I do not get into the weeds of the what specific legal form something takes or does not take and blah, blah, blah. I'm no interest in that. Although recognize the practical necessity of doing it. And the book does help unpack all that for sure. And meanwhile, there's this world of, you open up a business newspaper and it's all about like the bigger, better, faster, more. Like every time I ask somebody, yeah, like, so when I say the word entrepreneur, who do you think of? You know, sorry, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, blah, blah, these guys, Silicon Valley, Mark Zuckerberg, whatever. And I'm like, those aren't the entrepreneurs I know. Those are the entrepreneurs that are held up by the media and the sort of power establishment. It's like, you got to build a unicorn and you got to be this global, and disrupt things and whatever. And I'm like, actually, I kind of want to repair things. I don't know about you. I'm not really into the disruption part. Like I'm happy to disrupt capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy. Yes. Okay. I want to disrupt that. But for the most part, I'm just looking in, I think we need more people who are finding solutions from their own lives. Like the stories that I told you about my own life, it was like we are given gifts that are very particular and that may not fit with, the mainstream. I was never going to be an investment banker. I was never going to be, I don't know, whatever, veterinarian. I don't know, but that we have insights. And in the case of equity seeking groups in particular, so women, trans, non-binary people, people of color, indigenous people, people of diverse abilities, etc., people who are left out of the unicorn paradigm, let's call it. We need those people because they're the ones with the ideas. They're the ones who see the things that the unicorns don't see about what really matters to people and what we really need in the world. And the other piece around this has to do with scale. It's like there's this mania of like, it's got to be scalable and it's got to be, blow it up and whatever. And I've had a lot of people heartbreakingly come to me and they say, I've got this idea and I've got but it's not scalable. So I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, okay, we need to talk. Yes, something needs to be as much as possible financially sustainable, of course, but that's not what scale means. Scale means it just needs to be bigger just because it needs to be bigger, just because that's what people do. And that's what business says you need to do. So you have to do it. And it's like, why? Like, I'm very influenced by, in this moment, two people. So Dr. Suzanne Simard, who's a forest ecologist at UBC, who's the author of a book called The Mother Tree, Finding the Mother Tree, and an economist called Kate Rayworth. And she's the author of a book called Donut Economics. And between the two of them, basically what they point to is to look to natural systems or biomimicry for ways for people and for organizations to grow and work together in a new way, the way trees do in a forest. Trees in a forest, Dr. Suzanne Samard discovered, do not grow by competing with one another. They grow by connecting with one another and having a relationship and sharing things. And that's how a forest grows. That's how an ecosystem grows. Kate Rayworth, for her part, points out very astutely that if you look at the cycle like of life of a plant or a human or a tree, that the way it grows is very rapidly when it's young, and then it sort of plateaus. It's a state she calls thriving. And so, like, for example, like, when's the last time you or I got taller? We don't. We don't. We're mature, right? And we are mature from when we're whatever, late teens until whatever. So she calls this state thriving. And then, of course, we procreate. So, this idea, if you contrast that sort of growth curve, if you will, of this kind of, spurt and then sort of plateauing and you're doing your thing. And if you're a tree, you're producing oxygen and habitat for wildlife and whatever, and then you drop your seeds and then you go back into the forest floor. That is the natural cycle of life. What we do with organizations is we want it to be a hockey stick. It's always got to be up and to the right, and the faster, the better. Dr. Rayworth points out that there is only one entity in the natural world. There's only one thing that naturally has that growth curve that does that, and that is cancer. So we are seeking in our business models essentially to emulate something that is extremely dangerous, extremely rare, that is outside of the way any other plant, animal, fish, person, tree grows. So you got to ask yourself, why? And how could this be different? And why don't we try and be like, yes, as wild as it sounds, I am saying that people should be more like trees and companies should be more like trees. And so that's where my head is at right now. And that's what I'm trying to take inspiration. That's partly why I love gardening. And there's this natural ebb and flow and this natural, we're not just always growing and going, looking at your plants. Well, you got to keep growing, you guys. Come on. I know it's November, but like, let's go. I'm going to dump some more fertilizer on you so you keep growing because I just need you to be bigger. I don't know why. Like, it's that. And anyways, so the book, it talks a lot about that. And it talks a lot about how it can be harder for everyday people to find, because role models, to find courage, to find their ideas being validated. If you come from a group, an equity seeking group, with an idea that's based on your culture, your experience, whatever, and you walk into a room of mostly white male investors or whatever and go, I think this matters, you're not going to get, like, people aren't going to see you. Everything about that picture is so messed up. Like, yes, I do think, people from equity seeking groups belong in front of audiences of, venture capitalists for sure. I wish the makeup of that room of venture capitalists would change. And I wish the way they thought about what success even meant would change, but whatever, let's start where we are. But basically the call to action in the book is for no matter who you are, do what you can with what you've got where you are. And it's not too small. If it's a project, do it. Like, that's the point, is like, we need everybody right now. It's all hands on deck. Nothing is too small. Too small that's bullshit. And we need to do it together. And we need to do it in a spirit of collaboration, not competition. Like, forget the unicorns. We need zebras. So zebras, there are many more of them. They're real. They travel in herds. That's where that metaphor comes from, the zebra versus the unicorn. And it's an amazing organization out there called Zebras Unite that folks might want to check out. Anyway, so that's what it's about, but it's very personal. And I think that's the other thing. Business books aren't typically personal because that's that weird separation of like, yeah, it's unprofessional to talk about, whatever. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you the story of getting my period for my first time. And I'm going to tell you, whatever, like all these things, because it's the real, this is a journey. As you pointed out, your question was, what's your journey been? And it's like, this is your life. It's not just your work.
I love you, Madeleine.
Oh, thanks.
Really,
friend.
it's always healing when we speak. And I always have a profound shift. The last one was really getting clear that I wanted to remove my IUD and reclaim my period. So that's happening. And this one was relating the common business model to cancer. That just hit me deep in my core, maybe because I'm a cancer thriver, but just it gives me this very clear visual and definitely urgency to shift and to keep questioning. And I'm going to be using your book, my new Bible, to guide me on that journey and that transition. So, the last question is always on this podcast, what does being the change mean to you? I think you've demonstrated that throughout our entire conversation. And if you could put words around it, what would you want to say about being the change right now?
Well, I think it's these times demand that we kind of dig even deeper, like in around self-limiting beliefs and fear and asking for help. And if the big thing feels too hard, talk to someone. Like, this is my number one people, like, what is your number one piece of advice? And it's always to have a conversation with another human. It can even be, it's like, I'm scared about this issue. Okay. Okay, great. And see what happens. Or I'm wondering about this thing or whatever. Like, tell someone, because you're never are we going to get any of these projects. Like, this is another falsehood of the unicorn paradigm, that it's this toxic culture of individuality. That's not it. Leadership in the future is collective and collaborative, and it's going to be done by sharing our hearts, not just finding the best idea. And it's building those relationships and those networks and those communities. And so really all my ask of anybody who is listening to go and have a conversation with somebody about what your vision or about, or failing that, what you're scared of or intrigued by. Curiosity is just the most important thing. And tell the story of your life. Like the way you asked me, like, what are the things that have shaped you, that really showed you who you were? Have that conversation with someone, and that something will happen, will come out of that. Like, it's that kind of truth telling and sharing and bonding that leads to the creativity that builds the relationships where bit by bit you have change. And so that's where it starts.
Oh, Madeleine, you're a mentor that I need right now. So many of us need right now. So I'm grateful again that you've taken the time out to join us today and share your wisdom, share your stories, and your vulnerability with us. I think that is heart opening and so inviting for so many people. So thanks for the love that you give and all the gifts that you also give to this world. So grateful for you.
Likewise, Amelia. And yeah, just being in your presence is also very healing for me. And I feel very, very seen by you. And I feel like you've held the space so beautifully that made me feel safe to like really have some stuff come up. And yeah, and I hope it reaches people. And I want to congratulate you for being an amazing change maker and creating, this circle of change community and the work that you're doing. And also for introducing me to the term cancer thriver. And that I'm on that one. I'm so on that one. And so thank you for that, my friend. And I'm very pleased to reconnect anytime.
Thank you. I'm now passing the talking piece to you. If you feel called to put your voice in the circle, please head to humconsulting.ca/podcast and share your story there. I cannot wait to hear what has come up for you as you have listened to what has been shared here today. I wish you love and joy beyond your wildest imagination. Thank you so much for being here in the Circle of Change. I also want to express my gratitude to the following peeps. Circle of Change is recorded on Lekwungen territories, and I am so grateful to live on this land. Our opening and closing music was created by the talented E-Roll Beats. You can find his creations at erollbeats.com. And special thanks to my coach, Mary Chan of Organized Sound Productions, for bringing this podcast to life. Until next time, ciao.